For this podcast, we're proud to partner with Zurich Life and Investments. As one of the last true independent life insurers, Zurich has always believed in the value of advice and the professionals who provide it. They continue to invest in programs such as this one that are designed to strengthen the health and reputation of the advice profession. They're excited about the chance to partner with us, XY Advisor, to help shape the future direction of advice and help make it more accessible to more Australians. To find out more or to check out some of the latest advisor support tools, visit the website or ask your Zurich BDM.
Mr. Brian Parker, one of Sunsuper's finest. How you
Good to
going?
be here. Not bad at all. Not bad for Friday afternoon.
Yeah, there's worse places to be.
Really? No, I can't even.
Oh,
Is that when you
jeez. Go straight for the jugular.
What a start. Come on. Far away.
Mate, do you normally work out of Brisbane?
No, work out of Sydney. No.
Okay.
So all the investment guys are in Sydney.
Yep.
But the sort of engine room is in Brisbane, Vegas, yeah.
Right. Is that because you get better investment results in Sydney than Brisbane?
Oh, definitely.
Actually, I want to talk about that. So do you think in a colder climate, people make smarter, more rational, less emotional financial and investment decisions?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And maybe not colder, but maybe in, Sydney's a financial centre. I mean, all the sort of investment, all the financial markets, most of the investment expertise is kind of based in Sydney and Melbourne. That's the reality.
And what does it take for someone to have investment expertise?
It's hard to say. I think a lot of patience. There's a certain amount of technical stuff you need, but patience, a sense of humility, knowing that you just do not have a monopoly on wisdom, that there are plenty of really, really smart people out there. I mean, I think I call it the sort of Clint Eastwood approach to investing. I mean, a man's got to know his limitations, right? Overconfidence is death. Which is why a lot of men tend to make really crap investors compared to women. There's a lot of evidence for that.
Yeah.
So, knowing your limitations, being aware that you do not know everything, and being aware that, the world is an uncertain place. You know less than you think you do about how the world's going to evolve from here, and that goes to overconfidence. People who make overconfident investment decisions end up stuffing up.
Do you see? Do you spend much time around financial planners?
Yeah, a fair bit. In my former lives, I spent a lot more. So I spend my time around other investors, but a lot of time around members, around policy committee members for corporate super plans, the odd journo, and a fair few financial advisors as well.
And who do you think does financial planning well? What's the type of characteristics of a good financial planner, in your opinion?
I think someone who's a therapist. I always find it, I think, the investing side of things, there are too many financial planners out there, I think, who they're kind of frustrated investors in some way. The best financial planners I've come across have been kind of professional handholders. Their job is to hold their client's hand through their financial life. The investing is actually a small part of that. Much more, I think the best financial advisors actually are behavioural analysts in a way. They manage clients' behaviours so that clients don't do dumb stuff. That's the prime function of a financial planner, I reckon.
So Brian's like, just leave it to me, guys. You just go out there and talk to people. Do you think?
No, that's literally the behavioural stuff is the hardest thing. Like you might generate, really great investment returns, but if the end member or if the end client ends up doing really dumb things from, say, a timing perspective, like buying into something after a whole bunch of other people have made money, or getting out after they've suffered a paper loss, those sort of really bad decisions end up pretty much destroying the impact of otherwise good investment performance. So there's a whole bunch of behavioural finance stuff which says that, the market might have delivered, say, 8 or 9% over the last 20 or 30 years, but the average investor only got 3 or 4. And it's not taxes and it's not fees, it's generally bad behaviour. People actually buying high and selling low instead of doing the opposite, or ideally instead of just sort of sitting tight.
So do you think sequencing risk, that sort of any loss after the age of 55 is a major threat?
I think it's a big deal. And what it means is that, look, you do not want a really big market correction ruining your retirement. That's a big learning from the GFC. The number of people who had their retirement plans just kind of destroyed or really badly dented by being overexposed to share markets during that period. It's kind of weird that one of the truisms of investing is that, how good your retirement ends up being sometimes depends on when you were lucky or unlucky enough to be born. Right. If you just happen to retire at the wrong time, you're out of luck compared to someone who might have retired just a few years earlier or even a year later.
Yep.
So managing that sequencing risk, I think, is going to be is a pretty big challenge.
Yes.
You still want to have some exposure to growth assets, but you want to make sure if you think about it from like a pilot, you want the smoothest landing you can. Right. And I think, again, this is where good financial advice can really kick in. It helps fund members, it helps their clients come into their retirement and have a smooth landing.
Yep. So you're an economist, and I could tease out that sequencing risk was a big deal. What's some other key macro things that you think advisors should be paying attention to?
Macro thing, I reckon the environment right now is really, really challenging because if you look at the kind of universe of investments out there, nothing's cheap. Right. So if you were starting an investment journey from scratch and saying, well, I'm just going to go out there and buy stuff that's cheap, well, good luck with that. Nothing's cheap. Bonds are expensive, property's expensive, shares are expensive. Even like 12 to 18 months ago, if we were having this conversation, if you said to me, well, what's cheap? I would have said, oh, look, there's a fair bit of value in the emerging markets, so emerging share markets. Yeah, well, that was a year and a half ago. That was like 30% ago. Well, even there, it's hard to find stuff which is cheap. So it means that you end up sort of looking and saying, well, okay, what looks relatively attractive, or at least maybe least unattractive, which is not a very satisfying position to start your investment journey in when you're just saying, it's almost like saying, look, I like the share market because it's relatively cheap compared to, say, bonds or cash or term deposits. Yeah, that's fine, but it's like being the best looking person in a room full of really ugly people, right? It's not a great endorsement.
Adrian actually experiences that from time to time.
Oh, I hear you, brother. I mean, I've been told I've got a great head for radio. But this is scary when you see this big video.
Oh, you got a great voice for a podcast, Brian.
Look, we're kind of late cycle. The past returns have been brilliant, and I think the main thing we need to get across, the message we need to get across to the clients of financial advisors and super fund members is that no one should do their planning assuming they're going to have a run through to retirement where you get double-digit returns per annum forever. It just doesn't work that way. We've been really, really fortunate for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Back in February 2009 when the world was about to end, just when you think things couldn't get any worse, they don't. They get better. Right?
Yep.
And you've had a run of really good returns, but it just means now, okay, the rearview mirror looks really pretty, but the windscreen looks a bit scarier. Look, we can't comment on particular banks, but one thing. Let's widen it out and talk about Europe, right?
Okay.
On our list of worries, Europe has been there for quite a while. Not because of Greece. No one really cares about Greece unless you happen to be Greek. Okay. But the main game. Sorry, Adrian. But the main game has always been Italy.
Yeah, man.
And the only reason people worried a lot about, for example, Greece and Portugal and Spain is that, Spain was a kind of big deal. But it wasn't so much those economies. It was like, what the hell happens if this spreads to Italy, right?
The smaller versions of Italy.
Exactly. Italy is a big deal.
It's
a G7
biggest
economy. It's a big bond market. A whole bunch of bond investors all around the world own Italian debt. The banking system, something like 18% of all the bank loans in Italy are like non-performing, which is pretty dire. The economy is kind of burdened by a heap of debt, bad banking system, high unemployment. It's just kind of a very stagnant economy. It's funny, it's the great lifestyle economy of the world, but in an economic fundamental sense, it's a real worry.
And then they've just voted in a government which is very anti-EU.
Absolutely, and it's part of this global trend. One of the big things is that as an investor, certainly in my career, you kind of kept an eye on politics. You did. You'd sort of needed to be at least an amateur political analyst, but it wasn't the main game. You kept a weather eye on politics, but economic fundamentals were very much the main game, and that's still mostly true. But now we find ourselves worrying about politics and about the path, the policy direction, if you like, in a lot of economies, which you didn't really have to worry about before. And I can't see that really curing itself in the short term. And it's not just Trump, it's wider than that. It's Brexit, it's Trump, it's what's happened in Italy. It's what happened in some economies in Eastern Europe where you get some sort of right-wing populists start to emerge.
Austria as well, right?
Yeah, and this is a worry. Luckily, some electoral systems where you might otherwise throw up some pretty disappointing candidates, like France, for example, or to some extent here, the electoral system doesn't tend to allow it. But in other economies where it does allow it, it means you get some pretty left field political outcomes.
Because they sort of have 5 parties and you only need to be the top of the 5
Or you might have, for example, like in our case, preferential voting system. So it's really, really hard for someone on the fringes of politics to form a government. It's pretty much impossible, right?
Yeah.
In France or in any system where you've got two rounds of presidential voting, so you have a runoff between the top two contenders. So, for example, in France, you didn't get Marine Le Pen because she just wasn't going to be a contender in the final round because all the other parties just united kind of to make sure she lost.
Right.
You could argue that she came uncomfortably close to victory, but nevertheless she lost, right?
Right.
So politics, I think, is also something that, and there's not much you can do about it from an investment point of view. It's very, very hard to invest for the kind of volatility that politics and geopolitics throws up. But we have to keep more of an eye on political developments than perhaps we have in previous decades.
Well, and I guess I was extrapolating your point just then. If these isolationist type governments get in, then they want to remove themselves from euro, and now that's now happened in Italy. Can we go through some scenarios?
Oh, look, and so far the government that's been formed has kind of maybe sort of softened the stance, the sort of anti-EU stance and anti-euro stance they've had. Okay, but I don't think we're out of the woods there yet.
Right. Well, let's talk about let's theorize.
Yeah, I mean, look,
let's say if they leave the euro.
Yeah, well, getting out of the euro is a lot harder for a country like Italy. I mean, all its debts are pretty much denominated in euro. No one's going to want to be repaid in like new lira or whatever you want to call it.
But what if they call it new sweet lira?
And that's not going to happen, mate. No one will fall for that crap. So at the end of the day, you go through just massive disruption in one of the major economies of Europe, and that's really dire. Leaving the EU itself, we've already, I think, seen with Brexit, the grown-ups are not in charge. And if you're going to actually try and extricate yourself from that after sort of being so enmeshed in it for decades, you really need serious grown-ups in charge, and they're just not. What's pretty clear to me from looking at Brexit and the whole thing that's happening there is that no one really has a clue how to manage this. They really are flying blind, and I can't say I'm all that optimistic about how that's going to pan out.
Is it actually still happening?
Yeah, it's still going to happen.
Right.
Now, there's all these calls now for, oh, look, we had this vote and it was close, and now if you put it to a vote again, it wouldn't get up. Well, it's all a bit late now. I'm not sure how you can actually go and say, let's have another referendum and see if we can go again. Or if you put it up, or if you get a proposal and it's rubbish and it goes to a parliamentary vote, would the majority of the House of Commons vote against it? I don't know what happens then, and I don't know how the British public responds to that. The people who are in favour of staying would be obviously pretty happy and relieved, but the Brexiteers would be furious, and it's not no one really has a clue how that sort of scenario would pan out. And the other thing too is from an investment perspective, it's important to bear in mind though. I mean, the UK, if it ends in tears, the UK is probably going to go through some short-term disruption, but as a long-term destination for investment capital, I mean, London is still going to be one of the major stock markets of the world. The economy is still going to be growing. It's still going to be a fairly advanced economy. Right. So there's still going to be investment opportunities there. So
it's quite structurally sound.
Yeah, I think that's right.
In terms of the way it operates. Whereas you go Italy and the way they operate internally.
It's not at all.
So that's why you got extra sensitivity, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, for example, we just sort of invested some more money into some airports into the UK, in Birmingham and Bristol. Not a large amount. We put some money in there. And the feedback was, well, why are you doing that with Brexit and stuff? And it's like, well, yeah, in the short term, there might be some disruption, but these are assets we're not going to be holding for 2 or 3 years. We're going to be holding them for years and years and years to come, right? And so over the longer term, the way I describe it is, look, England is still going to have really crap weather. The Poms are still going to want to fly. So if you own an airport, you're still going to make a quid, right?
Would you invest in Elon Musk's boring company, the Hyperloop?
Want to be a bit cautious there. We like to invest in assets that actually generate a profit and generate dividends so you can actually value it a bit better. We don't really like throwing money into blue sky. We do have some money into things like startups and venture capital, but not a lot. We kind of prefer reliability of income. If you can give me a company which actually generates an income, or if you give me a property asset or an infrastructure asset where, it's got an income stream attached to it, so I can work out what I'm prepared to pay for it. But,
So Tesla versus Ford?
Well, at the moment, Ford wins hands down, I would have thought, given that, it's insanely profitable compared to Tesla. Look, Tesla may still end up being a great, great story. One thing, personal view.
You've got to pay for the pleasure.
You got to pay for the pleasure, but also personal view. is lithium batteries really the long-term solution, or is like hydrogen fuel cells the long-term solution? Now, Elon Musk himself has come out and said, oh, no, hydrogen is a really dumb-ass idea. Well, you'd expect him to say that, right? He's in the battery business.
Right.
But, are lithium batteries really the long-term solution, or is there a proper long-term solution around sort of hydrogen fuel cells and stuff like that? I think that's an interesting... And some of the car companies are sort of doing more work in that space. I mean, at the end of the day, hydrogen is a more abundant element than lithium. There was a great thing on Top Gear a few years ago where James May is cruising around California in a Honda Clarity, and he pulls up at a hydrogen pump and fills it up, and off he goes. And the thing's got a range of 200 or 300 miles and whisper quiet, and only output is steam. Not a bad idea.
That is so cool.
It is a very cool. It was a great bit of footage too, right? And the car itself was pretty bad ugly, but as a piece of technology, really, really nice
an expensive
idea.
car.
It was. I think per unit it was something like $900,000 each or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
But this is the thing: any new technology is like that, and so you need to get scale. And this is where the whole global car industry is going to have to make a massive choice over coming decades. Is that okay? What is the end game technology? Is it really battery? Or is it something more advanced again, the hydrogen fuel cell story?
Well, actually, you get me thinking
I don't know the answer to that. I'm just sort of waxing lyrical for
I'm just thinking about technology more broadly. Like, what are you guys seeing from there's obviously a lot of disruption, a lot of efficiency coming into all segments of the economy. Every business is a technology business these days. What sort of attrition / have you guys done modeling on the attrition of jobs combined with the uptick in new jobs? How do you see that playing out? It's
a really good question, and don't have a great answer. But let me just give you a few thoughts. One is that look, I do worry. I mean, I got 2 teenagers, and I worry about what the hell they're going to do longer term
for employment.
For employment, exactly. And the short answer is, I have no idea what jobs are going to be around in 10, 15, 20 years' time. No one does. But you know what? 10 years ago, there was, was there a professional podcast studio manager? Was that a job? I don't know. Was a social media manager? Yeah. Did your job exist, Joe? How many jobs were there for search engine optimizers? I mean, that's a job that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so who knows what kind of jobs are going to come out in the future? One thing I would say, though, is that I call it. I remember when I was at uni, the guy in the college I was at, in the block I was in, there was one art student, and there was like me doing economics. There was a couple of commerce guys, a couple of lawyers, and a couple of engineers, right? And the arts guy got sick of being picked on, so on the toilet paper dispenser, he wrote. Law, engineering, commerce, economics degrees, please take one, right? Which was his revenge, and we were like, good on you, Patrick. Da, 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 da. But now I think the next...
Now he serves awesome fries, though.
Oh, look, exactly right. Makes a hell of a latte. Yeah. But my point is, he's about to get his revenge, because I think the next 20 or 30 years... It's the creative stuff. It's the human stuff.
The lateral thinking.
Yeah, that's the thing. The stuff that can't be sort of, artificially intelligence competed away or whatever. Do you really want a robot looking after you when you're old and sick? In Japan, they're actually developing robots that can care for their elderly, because they're going to run out of people to care for their elderly.
Yeah, I got a lot of them.
Do you really want to? Yeah, exactly. Do you really want a robot caring for you when you're 90 and an age? I don't think I want to. It's sad. It's really sad. And so I just think that these sort of human roles, communication roles, are going to really be the source of growth in the future. Anything that you can pretty much automate away, which, to be honest, is a fair chunk of the average business degree,
totally.
A fair chunk of accounting, and even perhaps engineering.
Yeah. Unless you're creating something new.
So I just think, creation and innovation and communication and human skills, that's really the future.
I'll tell you what's creepy is AI can even create, as an ex-muso, I would shudder to call myself a muso these days, but as an ex-muso, I have a major interest in AI music. And I don't know if you guys have ever sat down and listened to these.
This is the first I've heard of it.
Man, it is.
Is this like when you go Spotify, play me something, and it's just like...
If anyone goes onto YouTube and just type in artificial intelligence symphony, there are programs out there that have just consumed so much music that they now have, from windpipe 1 and windpipe 2 through every single instrument in a orchestra down to, cymbal right? And they write these gorgeous symphonies that have been born out of, although music truly is maths. So there is that, it's all just hertz per second. But by no stretch of the imagination would I think that AI couldn't develop a brand new building that's never been designed, that is structurally and artistically beautiful, because it consumes all the designs of buildings all over the world. And then with AI, or what we call AI, which isn't truly AI. So I'm actually quite worried that even the lateral thinking, creative stuff is going to be. I mean, if you get, I believe it's IBM Watson that essentially dreams, and what they do is input data. I mean, entrepreneurship truly is taking an idea and trying to do something with it to attract people or other businesses to use it. Well, imagine if under big data that these AI programs can understand human behavior, and it can dream a million different business plans, go-to-market strategies, and to the point where they're pumping out perfect products and perfect services while listening to its own perfect music and housed in its own perfectly designed. I'm sitting here going, yeah, humans are a bug, not a feature.
I don't know. I mean, I like the idea of, if I go to a pub and I want to see a live act, I don't want to see a laptop sitting in the corner, right?
Well,
To me, I want a human, and I want a human with all their imperfections and all the, a human that's actually on stage and is kind of hungry to do well.
Well, I agree, but will AI
also,
agree?
Well,
will AI look at you and say, it might look at you and say, or me, or all of us, and go, well, we don't care if that's what you want.
Okay, well, which begs the question. I mean, if AI, I mean, anyone has to write music that has a market, right?
Yes.
I mean, if I get a piece of AI to design a symphony, will every human being that listens to that love it? Or will enough human beings listen to that, love it, and make money for who? Like,
I know
someone's got to be behind this.
This is the weird thing about AI that freaks me out. It makes humans redundant.
I don't know. Have you seen that movie, the kids, Wall-E? Where where the humans are just these blobs who just cruise around on spaceships, and all they do is shop and get looked after by robots, right?
Yeah.
Now, is that the future?
Oh God,
that is just utterly. I remember seeing that at the time and said, like so many of these kids, very sophisticated cartoons, there's elements of truth, and you look at the future and go, really? So we're going to make the planet so disgusting that we're just going to be cruising around the universe on giant spaceships and just getting fed and sold stuff we don't need, and robots are just going to sort it and end up sort of controlling us.
I know.
I'm not sure that's and even in that movie, the humans do get their revenge.
It's either that or the Matrix.
Yeah, I think I'd rather the cruise ship where I'm just constantly fed and watered for all eternity.
Exactly.
Well, it's like you look at marketing or social media, like it's converged on the personal brand so much with a lot of things, and like to get the cut through to people, because someone's story, personal story, narrative. That's what cuts through. So that's something that's probably going to continue, even if you go everything's automated. Like, because that just, if you assume that, well, the AI is commoditized. So what's going to differentiate amongst an AI solution? Well, it's some sort of personality coming in as a human.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, is that to me, when it's AI and it's kind of fake in that sense, give me a human any day. Give me a human on stage kind of sweating and working hard for their money and entertaining, wanting to entertain people.
Have you seen Google now making phone calls to people and the person on the other end doesn't know that it's an AI?
Yeah.
That's creepy.
Yeah, I don't want Google ringing me up at all, to be honest.
No.
AI or human, I'm just hanging up.
Yeah.
I have a very low tolerance for people who ring me up, machine or human, at like tea time at night, regardless of where they're located.
I got a real simple recipe. Just don't pick up your phone.
You got to do something. Well, that's the thing. I mean, how many people actually ring you on your landline these days?
Do you have a landline?
Yeah, and the only person
we don't have landlines.
The only people who ring us on the landline, my father-in-law, and my brother-in-law. Everyone else rings us on a mobile.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to my parents. I'm like, so you guys, like, how many people actually call you? And like, they've got your mobile too, these people. So if you just told them that they, like, the rest of them are all the telemarketing calls because you've been in the system for 20 years with the same number.
Yeah,
that's right. I do know a guy who engages telemarketers, and he deliberately, if someone rings up from Mumbai or wherever, and he just engages them in conversation and keeps asking them lots of questions back, and until he wastes a good 20 minutes of their time, and then says, "No, you know,
that's going to impact their KPIs
massively." Yes, but he never gets a call back, which is, problem solved.
That's a very good point.
Because he's particularly obnoxious, and he's got time to kill. So
you got to really
I've been waiting for your call. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly right. Or you just say, "Hold on," and put the phone down and walk away.
Yeah, I've done that. So out of active investing and passive investing, this sort of index, because Sun Super, I believe they've got an index option on the super fund, which is absurdly low in price. Yes. Like we're talking a handful of basis points, or to the effect of
0.09 or something.
It's pretty cheap, and the reason what we're trying to do, you can have way too many options, right? Again, go back to the way people make decisions. You want to give people enough choice so that they can do sensible things if they want to build portfolios themselves, but you don't want to have like dozens of choices because people just run a mile.
Yeah.
But also all the investment options we've got, and I'd argue this is, should apply to everybody. Every investment choice, every investment decision you make, every investment you make has to offer value for money, right? Now, are there really good active managers out there who are genuinely good at what they do, who over time are going to actually generate enough outperformance to justify their fees? Look, they are, but A, they don't come cheap, and B, they don't grow on trees. So you've got to be really, really careful about who you select. And we still use them. So in some of our options, and certainly in our diversified options, we'll use a combination, of active and passive share managers.
Anyone you care to share?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll use guys like Maple Brown Abbott that have had a good track record over the longer term. Guys like Bailey Gifford in global equities, for example. We also use some sort of quantitative managers as well, like Arrow Street overseas, that sort of provide a bit of incremental value added at very, very low cost. So quant guys, basically. So
the alternative sort of non-correlating performance.
Well, they're basically trying to give a reliable alpha through time. And the way we sort of think about it is kind of from a pyramid. So the base of the pyramid is passive, very, very low cost, just to sort of anchor the return. Then you'll have like some active quantitative managers were pretty risk controlled but very, very cheap. And the top of the pyramid is like fully active, benchmark unaware. We just pick stocks we like and don't own stocks we don't like, right? And let them loose. Right? Now, what you end up with is, a reasonably good risk-controlled value-for-money portfolio, where you're not just going to rely on a handful of managers to deliver, and the fees can be kept pretty low. The other thing we also like is performance fee arrangements. It sort of aligns the manager with our members. So, active managers do tend to talk themselves up. In case you haven't noticed, they're not backward in coming forward. So, if you're talking to someone, it's like, yeah, well, I think you're really good too. In fact, if you're prepared to back yourself, how about we pay you a base fee, which is, well, we'll keep the lights on and pay your people. And if you're really that good, then we'll write you a performance check.
Woo!
If you don't, well, at least you keep the lights on.
Yeah, back yourself.
Back yourself. And if they're prepared to,
does anyone take that?
Oh yeah,
really.
Pretty much all the active managers in the portfolio sign up for that.
Wow.
So it helps you keep the base fee low, and it just means that, okay, if you have to write a check for outperformance, at least you're writing it for the right reasons because they've delivered. And if you then go through a period of underperformance, they've got to make that back before the clock starts again. The watermark. Yeah, absolutely.
Can any advisor sign up to take advice fees from Sun Super?
Yeah, you can. So we have
any advisor?
I think pretty much you can register, and you can register, and you can get access to the portal.
Is there ongoing advice fees?
Yeah, we can actually do ongoing advice fees.
Cool.
So any industry funds where you can log in and actually see a portfolio. Oh, I see. And you guys aren't technically an industry fund, is that right?
We're a multi-industry, multi-employer fund, basically.
Just an everyday man super fund.
What's the difference between Sun Super and a retail super fund at this stage?
Well, at the end of the day, the big difference We don't have shareholders that need a dividend. We don't have shareholders that need a profit margin. We make enough money to keep the lights on and to reinvest in the business, and any extra beyond that gets given back to members, basically.
In the form of a dividend?
Well, in the form of lower costs or better fees, or lower costs, lower fees, or better administration, or better advice, or whatever. So basically,
is those records public? As in,
we publish an annual report, absolutely.
Yeah, really? With the accounting, like how much cash on hand and everything like that?
Yeah, we publish an annual report, including annual financial statements.
Like a public company?
Basically, yeah.
Wow.
And you can the other big thing is that even though we have a sort of a Queensland heritage, and so back in the 80s when the industry funds were being formed in Melbourne in particular, Joe Bjelke-Petersen was Premier of Queensland. Not much missed. I grew up in Queensland, so I'm a little bit bitter and twisted, right? But back then, he basically took the view
character.
He was a character. That's a polite way of putting it. But back then, he said, "Well, look, none of our money is going south of the Tweed, so we're going to keep our money in Queensland." So he basically arranged to set up a Queensland-based industry fund, and so basically, it's kind of nominally looked after, or our nominal shareholders, if you like, are the Chamber of Commerce and Industry for Queensland, the Queensland branch of the AWU, and the Queensland Council of Unions. And so the employers and the unions have reps, but we've also got a third of the board that's independent.
So it's a different history than
multiple. I thought it was a conglomerate.
Is that how you guys ended up actually being friendly to advisors?
Basically, I mean, you can actually. We've got 1.3 million members. Probably about 2/3, or maybe less now, are in Queensland.
Well, you guys just became the third biggest, didn't you?
Not the biggest, but we're certainly top 10.
The third biggest. You guys are 40
We're
billion
one of the
plus.
fastest growing, absolutely.
Are you pushing for this top 10 for default with the Productivity Commission? Are you guys preparing for that?
Well, I think we're preparing for any eventuality, I reckon. We've really taken the view that in this business, you need to get big in terms of member numbers so you can drive your costs down and drive your fees down. Because if you don't do that, you will not survive longer term. We certainly took the view some years ago that in an industry where there is so many smaller funds that are under pressure, you don't want to be one of them. And the best way you can not be under that kind of pressure is to grow quickly, but also grow in such a way that you are not on the radar screen when people say you're subscale, you don't have enough members, you don't have enough FUM. And I think Warren Chant at Chant West published a study maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago where he said, look, unless you're at 10 bill under management, you're just not going to survive. You don't have the scale. If you did that study today, I don't know whether 10 bill would be the figure, but it certainly wouldn't be any smaller.
Have you guys, has Sunsuper ever acquired other small industry super funds?
So we merged with Kinetic Super, and that merger was finalised on the 12th of May, I think, this year.
Right.
The Kinetic board were actually
that was ex-media, right? Media then
more recruitment,
recruitment
space.
Right, yeah.
But the Kinetic board really took a decision that was very much in the interest of their members, and it was quite a brave decision where they said, look, we need to do something here, we are subscale. They kind of saw the future and started looking for potential partners, and so they ended up partnering with Sunsuper. From our point of view, it means that we pick up another 250,000 members, another I think about 4 billion under management, give or take, and it just adds to the scale, which means the cost per member can come down.
What was the acquisition cost for 250,000?
Oh, I can't recall, mate, but it was basically it was a merger, so it was like a there's
like
not really an
equity swap
cost.
sort of
It's
thing.
basically you're bringing two funds together, so it's not really like a corporate transaction. There's no equity as such to buy.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm just a humble economist.
It's like two charities merging together.
Economist there. It's pretty much if you're bringing two pools of money together and two teams together.
Why don't industry super funds pay a dividend to their members? Because whenever I hear we're for-profit member, I always think, well, where's my profit? Like
it's in the return.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what are the assets of the fund? The assets of the fund, they're the members' assets. They're not the fund's assets.
Totally.
Right. So the assets of the member generate a return, and that return is credited to the member's accounts.
Right.
The only thing that comes off that is the fees that go into delivering that return. So yes, you pay an internal team, you pay administrators and directors, and you pay external managers. But net of those fees, that's what goes into members' accounts, really. When part of the fees that we charge go on really running the fund and running.
So
the
if for
structure
whatever
of the fund.
reason there is a surplus on the fee, then that money would just get punted back into a return.
It'd be basically a return, yeah. So, we generate a
okay.
return and we deduct enough to basically meet our costs, and that's it. But the
Right.
key thing is that, we don't have a board and shareholders that say you must do a 10% return on our equity,
Right.
because that just doesn't enter into the conversation.
Right.
And there's no dividends to pay. There's no return on equity targets per se. It's all about you generate a return, you cover your costs, and you hand it back to members.
Right.
That's it.
You'd have quite a satellite view of what's going on in the fund, across the board.
Yeah.
What's the trend ethical? Because I know you guys have an ethical option.
Yeah, we do.
How are you finding? Can you see a noticeable trend?
We've not attracted massive inflows into that option, but
Okay.
one thing we do is that we do have an ESG filter on pretty much everything we do.
Okay, so you got an overall.
Absolutely.
Sort of,
So all the investment managers we appoint, they have to sign up to take into account environmental, social, and governance factors in deciding which investments to make. They have to sign that up. That is part of the investment management agreement they sign with us. In addition, if we go into any asset or any particular strategy, it gets voted on. The key decision-making body in the investment team, the Investment Recommendation Committee, which is basically the Chief Investment Officer and the senior investors, including, and I sit on that committee, but who also sits on that committee is the ESG manager. So he basically has a vote on everything. But even before it gets to that, the ESG manager looks at everything. And if it doesn't sort of meet his criteria, if it doesn't stack up from an environmental, social, governance criteria, it doesn't get up.
Right.
We also find that when you're talking about ESG factors, as a general rule, we have a preference to engage rather than sort of ban stuff. One of the obvious exceptions is tobacco. It's very, very hard to dress that up as anything other than a killer, right? But if we see, for example, on things like climate change, we'd much rather work with companies, for example, working with mining companies. And you look at what happened with some of the major mining companies that have actually moved to reduce thermal coal as part of their overall portfolios. And I think a big part of that has come from global investors saying, look, we've seen the future and it's not pretty. You need to be down weighting this. And so we'd much rather engage with companies in order to change behaviour and to improve governance. Because if you basically decide, no, I'm out, I'm not going to invest with you, you're losing a seat at the table, you're losing a voice. So we'd rather have a voice, we'd rather have a seat at the table than not. That's kind of the way we think about these issues.
Wow.
I guess with what options are coming through, are you guys going to start to look at, because I know there's, I don't know, with that much scale, you've got the ability to bring in new options. Is there anything more funky that's on
I don't know. I mean,
horizon?
To me,
because I always look at things,
yeah,
it's boring. It's just an industry fund sort of layout. You can pick a.
Well, at the end of the day, the funky doesn't necessarily make a great investment. It's got to, anything has to stack up as an investment, right? And to me, if it's funky and stacks up as an investment, it doesn't need to be a standalone. It just goes into the fund. We can invest in a whole range of different things. Some of them are really boring and just, God forbid, they just make a profit and pay a dividend. How boring is that? Sometimes funky is like thoroughly unprofitable, right?
So no.
Hello,
I don't want to apply. Funky is kind of nice, and people who work in marketing love funky, but investors would rather profitable over funky any day.
Totally.
Well, in the funky space / ESG sort of social space, impact investing, social businesses, anything around that?
It's something that's on the radar. It's not something
a hard
we
market.
do a lot. It is a hard market. It's not something we sort of do a lot of. We don't sort of. It's on our radar, but we don't have anything specific in that space. But let me give you an example of one deal we did from a social impact, which was a really beautiful deal. Aged care. Okay. Now, we need currently, if you look at the Commonwealth Treasury numbers, Australia needs like a lot more aged care beds starting, about 5 minutes ago would be good. We desperately are short of aged care beds.
Right.
In Queensland, for example, some of the not-for-profit providers of aged care, and they tend to be the high-quality providers in this space, their occupancy rates of their existing facilities are well into the 90%. So they need facilities.
Why would something be not-for-profit in the aged care facility?
It's things like faith-based groups, so,
right.
Anglicare, Pres Care. And we got approached by one of our managers to say, look, because they've been talking to some of the aged care providers who tend to be, especially the faith-based ones, the religious ones, tend to be kind of asset-rich and cash poor. So if they want to build a new facility, they go into the arms of their local bank, and the bank says, yeah, we'll lend you the money, but we want a big chunk of that money repaid quite quickly. And that puts financial pressure on the provider, which in turn gets passed on to the patient, right, and their family. The manager approached us and said, well, look, there's a Pres Care facility that they want to build in Townsville. The Pres Care people, they own the land and they've got approval to build it, and they've got a builder lined up ready to go, but they don't have the funding and they'd rather not go to their bank. And would you look at this? And we looked at it and said, well, actually, you can design a system whereby we buy the land off them. We then inject another chunk of money to build it, and you lease it back to them over a very long-term lease with them. So a 10 by 10 sort of arrangement.
Give them that certainty.
Absolutely, you know, and we don't need to be repaid. We own the building. It was just a really nice investment because it ticked an urgent social need. We desperately need aged care facilities and new beds, but from the perspective of our members, it was a good thing to do with a nice return. So it's certainly, we're not giving up.
And you see that happening more often?
I think we do. It's certainly a model we'd like to look at to do elsewhere.
Because there's probably a lot of sweet spots in the market where just because of policies or like other maybe arbitrary reasons, certain capital sources don't get involved.
Yeah, I mean, this is a new one. We're surprised. I think others have done a little bit, but certainly a first for us. And I think it's probably the biggest deal that's been done. But don't quote me on that. I shouldn't really say that given this is being recorded. But it's certainly we're very much an early adopter in this space, and we'd certainly look at other opportunities like that.
I think there's Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They have I don't know how you'd stumble upon those guys, but I know they focus on impact investing.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of stuff that can be done, but one thing you've got to be wary of is that, yes, our members are happy for us to be engaged in the community and want their super fund to be engaged in the community. And we do a lot of initiatives like things like Dreams for a Better World, where we provide grants to emerging charities doing really interesting stuff, and then we do sort of an annual award where you provide a more substantial amount of money to the annual winner. Okay, so our members are certainly happy for us to do things like that, but at the end of the day, they primarily need a return. You know, primarily our sole purpose is to fund their retirement. You know, we describe it as, you know, getting our members to fulfill their retirement dreams. That requires return. You might feel good about what we do, but if it doesn't provide the return you need to live on in retirement, then it's all fairly academic. It's all fairly...
Well, that's the thing. You can look at it and go, well, like everything's risk priced. And if you go to take on more risk to achieve the outcome, you're sort of subsidizing the outcome. And sort of...
There's no free lunch, you know. You've got to, you know, if you want a return, you're going to have to be prepared to take risk. I mean, I often say to people, look, we're not in the risk avoidance business. We're in the risk management business. You know, we take and manage risks that we hopefully understand as well as possible, and risks that we can manage, and risks where we're very confident that we can be adequately rewarded for those risks. That's ultimately what we get paid to do. If we're not doing that, we're not going to be generating the kind of returns people need, but it also means that our members won't be able to sleep at night. And frankly, sleeping at night can never be overrated, right? We ideally want our members to sleep soundly at night knowing their money's in good hands.
Yeah. Mate, look, obviously sunsuper.com.au is how people can get in contact with Sun Super, but do you play a more of an active role in the financial advice world, or do you?
I do get out and about and speak at the odd advice conference when I'm invited. Also we're finding a number of financial advisors starting to use Sun Super as a very easy option for some of their clients who want a good performing value for money superannuation solution, and so that's been a growing part of our business. Happy to support financial planners that do that with client seminars, for example. And I've done that in my 2 former lives, which is lots of fun. I think getting out and talking to the end client and talking to the member, it's funny. My boss, Ian Patrick, when he joined, he said to us, keep me in mind for member seminars because it helps me keep it real.
Mm.
And I've always remembered that, because to me, getting out and actually talking to people who ultimately pay your fees, who you are ultimately working for, it helps keep it real.
Prevents
These
a
people,
disconnect.
exactly.
Yeah.
These people should have a right to come up to you and kick you in the butt or shake your hand, depending on the day, right? That's what you get paid to cop. As I said, it just helps keep it real. So I do stuff like that. I do the odd media gig.
Is there any side projects that you get involved with, or
even apart from the odd webinar with you guys?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
or non-super activities that might be something different?
I don't know. I mean, what do I do? God, I don't do a lot of side projects. I mean, I've got sort of 2 teenagers who keep me occupied, and a wife who tells me what to do on weekends and stuff. So
Good wife.
I have
Every good man needs one of those.
I have plenty of stuff to keep me busy.
Very good.
But
Well,
my day job
how
is
would
great
someone
fun.
reach out to you if they were interested in getting you to chat to their clients?
Oh, look, you can hit me on LinkedIn. So I've got a LinkedIn profile, so you can sort of direct message me there. You can follow me on Twitter. I've got a really lame Twitter handle, though. It's called @Parkonomics, which I'm going to have to change because it's really lame. And my son just my son just rolls his eyes whenever he hears that, because
Wait a second, now I love it.
How good is it? You're going to get tagged when the podcast comes out.
So when the podcast came out, I
Parkonomics.
Parkonomics. I just need more followers. I'm trying to actually crack 400 followers if I can.
It's very marketable,
Great.
actually. Parkonomics, I can see a brand there.
I don't know. It's kind of naff, but we'll give it a go. So if people watch
t-shirts.
this and want to sign up, Parkonomics t-shirts. That's sad.
Hell yeah.
You need to get out more, Adrian. You really do. But yeah, it's but certainly following me on Twitter, and I don't barrage people on Twitter. I mean, if I've got something interesting to say, or if I read something interesting that I feel like is worthwhile sharing.
Do you ever try and start Twitter wars?
Not really. I got involved in one,
How'd that go?
which badly. It was one
I
over.
usually do.
It was one over. I sort of joined. Peter Fitzsimons was in a big debate about, and still is, about the stadium splurge, so called. And
Allianz.
and I just thought, I've been to both stadiums. There's nothing terribly wrong with them, and certainly nothing that involves spending that kind of money on 2 new stadiums that are still relatively young in terms of stadium years.
Yeah.
And so he was getting a flogging, and there was one comment that some guy made, which I just thought was particularly, and it was more economics related, so I fired in, and that was a dumb thing to do, because that was 48 hours of my life. I never get
They got ya.
So I said,
So
and I figured that Peter Fitzsimons didn't need my help anyway. So,
Anyone that's listening,
Well, it's
try and
easy.
start a Twitter war at
No,
Parkonomics.
don't
Well, it's
start
easy
a
to talk
Twitter
about
war,
our
you know.
stadiums when you got access to when you go up there so often. You can access Suncorp, the best stadium in Australia.
It's a great stadium, yeah. It is
Oh.
very good. But, it all comes down, to me, economics is about opportunity costs. What else could you do with the money?
The
But it's
cauldron,
about
isn't it?
watching
It's the cauldron.
sport. It's about watching sport.
It's a lot of money for people who watch sport in Sydney, and they can't fill the current stadiums.
Yeah, no.
That's 'cause
if
they're
you could get
shit.
70 or 80,000 people at Homebush a week to watch a club game, terrific. In Melbourne, I remember going to.
They go to watch
a few
anything.
years-
Yeah.
they do, exactly, because it's Melbourne. But
They
I
could have the
remember a few-
international badminton tournament and it'd
Yeah.
be full.
Well, I remember going to watch it. I went down to Melbourne a few years ago with my son, and we thought, let's go to the G for a game, and it was a really ordinary game. It was only Richmond Hawthorn, which at the time Richmond was getting flogged, and the weather was rubbish, so they only had 45,000 people.
That's a small turnout,
But I just thought, really, that's a small crowd for an ordinary, and it ended up being a great game in Richmond.
Well,
won.
what's hilarious is they played the first Origin in Melbourne. It was packed out, and it's
Yeah.
bigger than when it's held in Sydney.
Yeah, no, it is true that people in Melbourne will just go to watch 2 cockroaches running across the G. Really,
That's what happens when you got better stadiums, bro.
I don't know, mate. Don't know about that. We'll agree to disagree on that one.
All right. Well, mate, it's awesome to have you on. Thank you very much.
Good on you. Thanks very
Appreciate
much,
it.
guys. Appreciate the
cheers, bro.
time. Cheers.